Good morning, beautiful souls. The sun is rising. I'm at the beach. I'm feeling very connected to life. And that's what Neo-Advaita will rob you of. A connection to life. A good life. Feeling alive. Even valuing life. So, I've spoken a lot about how Neo-Advaita is just completely different from traditional Advaita. And now what I'm starting to see is that Neo-Advaita has taken the Eastern paradigm and completely twisted it. Not just non-duality, but the underlying ideas that are there in traditional non-duality. The key one being Dharma. In traditional non-duality, you don't do self-inquiry until you have a firm foundation in Dharma. Dharma, most of us have heard of Dharma from a Buddhist perspective, but it's actually the central tenet of Vedic Indian philosophy. Dharma means many things. It means righteousness, harmony, harmonious action, that which supports harmony. There's this idea that if the individual is living a harmonious life and doing harmonious things, that ripples out into the whole. And so there's this idea of living your Dharma. And each person's Dharma is different because it depends on their capacities, their interests. There's universal things such as virtue, such as kindness and charity and truthfulness. But how each person does that is really dependent on the person. And so one of the key aspects of Dharma is this term Viragya. It often gets translated as detachment or renunciation. However, I was just listening to a talk by a traditional Hindu Swami, and she said it's not so much rejection, turning away from, what was the other, or giving up, which is how it's often translated, but in Neo-Advaita satsangs, that it's just hammered over and over and over to turn away from the world. They won't quite say it, but the Neo-Advaita teaching is to reject the world, reject everything but consciousness. So it's a very extreme form of Viragya. But what this traditional Advaita teacher said is it's not rejecting and it's not giving up. It's growing out of. After, and so this is where the idea of Dharma becomes so central. Because there's this idea of, in traditional Advaita, you don't go for moksha until you feel complete with this world. Until your life is reasonably in order, till you've fulfilled your desires. So there's this sense of, you don't reject desire, you don't turn away from desire, you skillfully fulfill them until you realize, like, hey, this isn't going to bring me happiness. It's this more holistic, gradual, gentle process versus this literally almost violent cutting off of desire and attacking desire that you find in Neo-Advaita, and really that you find in any fundamentalist conservative religion. And I've been saying from the start, Neo-Advaita is basically a fundamentalist religion. Well, here's another aspect. It's anti-desire. Traditional Advaita, in fact, this Swami, she said, in the pursuit of desire and wealth are valid pursuits, and we want to be successful at them. This is the difference between bullshit non-duality and real non-duality. Real non-duality meets you where you are. Most people are interested in money and pleasure. Most people, that's what they pursue all day long. And even, quote, spiritual people, they're still driven. All of us are driven by the desire for security, it's not just money, and pleasure. So if you try and bypass those primal needs and desires, it's going to make a mess. It did with me, and it did with many, many people who've written into me and who I've talked to. You know, this metaphor has been coming lately of, I've had some issues with my hip. So I went to a doctor and the doctor sent me to a physical therapist, and I got very specific stretches and very specific strengthening exercises to do. Because there's this one area that's sore, but there's all these other areas that are connected to it. And, it's like this muscle needs to be strengthened to support this muscle, so that this can come back into alignment. It's very intricate. Well, that's what the spiritual path is. But Neo-Advaita is just like, just stretch. I've got this condition where this muscle's pulling on this muscle and pulling that out of alignment, and this muscle is weakened and needs to be strengthened, and this one really needs to be stretched, and I need to be gentle with this one. It's this very, it's this very intricate healing process. So luckily I went to an expert, and they're like, okay, do this, and this stretch, and do it this long, this frequency, and do this, and this strengthening exercise. Because they look at the body as a whole, and they look at not just the place where it hurts, but all the things that are connected to that. Neo-Advaita, on the other hand, is like, just stretch. Everything will be okay if you just stretch. It's really primitive. And it's just like a conservative religion, like Protestant Christianity. Just accept Jesus and everything will be great. There's some, and the thing where it gets tricky is there's some truth. Like, yes, if you can just surrender, that's a powerful practice. But that's not the whole enchilada, and that's not going to give you a valid compass for living. And that's a big part of what Dharma is. In Vedic philosophy, it's a compass for how to live. And I've been saying this from the start. Neo-Advaita gives no compass. In fact, it attacks every valid or reasonable compass for what to do when you're not sitting with your eyes closed, practicing self-inquiry. So, in conclusion, to recover from Neo-Advaita, recently I was just like, I did this thing of, I just put aside, I'm like, okay, it's all nonsense. Everything I was taught in Neo-Advaita satsangs. But I didn't realize how deep it went. Because Neo-Advaita teachers misteach how to handle desire. Desire is the most primal aspect of being a human being. And when I say desire, I'm not talking about sex, so that's part of it. I'm talking about the phenomenon of desire, wanting anything. And so those of us who went to Neo-Advaita satsangs, we were just trusting. We entrusted these people with ourselves. Desire is intimately linked with who and what we are. I'm not talking anything, just put aside non-duality for a moment. Desire is a fundamental aspect of who and what we are. Vedic wisdom recognizes that and works with it in a skillful manner. So we went to these teachers, we thought they were enlightened, and so we entrusted them with the deepest aspect of ourself. And they weren't qualified. They weren't qualified for that. They're like, just stretch and everything will be okay. When really what we needed was like a freaking soul surgeon to help us navigate life, to skillfully relearn what to do with desire in a way that includes seeking pleasure in healthy ways and enjoyment. This Swami who I'm taking this course with, she's like, even a sadhu, even someone who's renounced everything and like has no possessions, even a sadhu needs a little pleasure. They can't eat toast every day. She said they'll put a little extra spice in their khichdi, like the most basic food there is. They're like, even a sadhu needs a little pleasure. So that's all I have for today. Neo-Advaita is not, it's not bullshit. You know, over and over I've been calling it like bullshit non-duality, and it's not bullshit. It's straight up mental toxicity. Pretending to be true, pretending to be helpful. I wish everyone a good day of recovering from toxic, insane, I don't even want to call it non-duality because it's not. These toxic, insane, deluded, deadly, truly deadly because it's anti-life teachings. Big love. Hope to see you on the beach.